Niccolò Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469, at a time when the city was politically unstable and frequently divided by internal conflict. Florence was officially a republic, but in practice its government was controlled by powerful families who competed constantly for influence. Machiavelli's family belonged to the lower nobility. His father, Bernardo Machiavelli, was a trained lawyer with a strong education in Roman law, but he struggled financially and was prevented by debt from holding public office. As a result, Niccolò grew up with direct exposure to political ideas, yet without access to political power itself. Bernardo owned a private library that included works by ancient Roman historians such as Livy and Cicero. From an early age, Niccolò read these texts and became familiar with the rise and fall of political systems, the behavior of rulers, and the strategies used to maintain authority. This informal education played a crucial role in shaping his understanding of politics. His mother, Bartolomea di Stefano Nelli, was deeply religious and placed strong emphasis on moral conduct and discipline within the household. She believed in virtue, faith, and proper behavior, values that contrasted sharply with the political reality unfolding outside their home. Growing up between these two influences, Machiavelli became aware of an important contradiction. While moral ideals were taught at home, political survival in Florence depended on calculation, alliances, and the careful use of force. This contrast did not confuse him. Instead, it sharpened his curiosity about how power actually functioned. Outside his family, Florence served as a constant lesson in political reality. The Medici family dominated the city without ruling it openly, using influence, patronage, and strategic alliances rather than formal authority. Governments changed, loyalties shifted, and foreign powers such as France and Spain repeatedly intervened in Italian affairs. By the time Machiavelli reached adulthood, he had already learned that political systems rarely operated according to their official principles. He saw that leaders often acted out of necessity rather than virtue, and that stability depended more on control than on good intentions. This early environment did not make Machiavelli cynical, but it made him realistic. He did not begin his career as a philosopher or a theorist. He began as an observer of political behavior in a city where power was never secure. By the late 15th century, Florence was one of the most politically complex cities in Europe. Although it was officially a republic, its political institutions were fragile and easily manipulated by those who understood how power truly worked. Elections existed, councils met regularly, and laws were written in formal language, but none of these structures guaranteed stability. Real authority depended on influence, wealth, and the ability to control key alliances at the right moment. At the center of this system stood the Medici family. They did not rule Florence as kings, nor did they openly dismantle republican institutions. Instead, they controlled the city indirectly, placing loyal allies in strategic positions and removing opponents through exile, pressure, or quiet negotiation. To an outside observer, Florence appeared free. To those living inside it, the limits of that freedom were clear. Machiavelli watched this system closely. He saw how political decisions were rarely based on ideology or moral principle. They were based on timing, advantage, and survival. Leaders who hesitated were removed. Those who adapted remained. This environment taught him that power was not something abstract. It was practical, flexible, and often invisible. Florence was also constantly under threat from outside forces. France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire all sought influence over the Italian city-states. When foreign armies crossed into Italy, Florentine leaders were forced to negotiate quickly, often abandoning long-held principles to protect the city from destruction. Alliances changed rapidly. Former enemies became temporary partners. Trust was limited and caution was essential. Within this unstable system, fear played an important role. Leaders understood that being respected was useful, but being feared could be more reliable in moments of crisis. Popular support could disappear overnight, but fear tended to last longer. Machiavelli did not invent this idea. He observed it repeatedly. By the time he entered public service, Machiavelli had already learned a critical lesson. Political power did not depend on moral purity or public approval alone. It depended on understanding human behavior under pressure. Florence was not teaching him how politics should work. It was teaching him how politics actually worked. In the next chapter, Machiavelli will move from observation to participation as he enters public office and begins his career as a diplomat inside this dangerous political system. In 1498, a major political shift took place in Florence. The Medici family was expelled from the city, and the Republic was restored. This moment created opportunities for new figures to enter public life, including a young and largely unknown Niccolò Machiavelli. At the age of 29, Machiavelli was appointed second chancellor of the Florentine Republic, a position that placed him at the center of diplomacy and state administration. Although he was not a powerful decision-maker, his role gave him direct access to the inner workings of government. As second chancellor, Machiavelli was responsible for diplomatic correspondence, intelligence reports, and negotiations with foreign powers. Over the next 14 years, he traveled extensively, representing Florence in meetings with kings, generals, and popes. These missions were not ceremonial, they were dangerous and unpredictable. Italy was fragmented, and every ruler was fighting to protect or expand his territory. Machiavelli met King Louis XIII of France, observed the court of Pope Julius II, and closely studied the actions of Cesare Borgia, one of the most feared and effective leaders of the time. Unlike many diplomats, Machiavelli did not simply record events. He analyzed them. He watched how leaders used deception, force, and negotiation depending on the situation. He noticed that successful rulers adjusted their behavior rather than following fixed moral rules. Cesare Borgia, in particular, left a strong impression on Machiavelli. Borgia combined cruelty with calculation, eliminating rivals quickly while presenting himself as a source of order. Machiavelli did not admire Borgia's morality, but he respected his effectiveness. This distinction would later become central to his political thought. Back in Florence, Machiavelli also played a key role in organizing a citizen militia. He believed that relying on mercenary soldiers was dangerous, as they lacked loyalty and often betrayed those who paid them. A state, he argued, should defend itself with its own citizens. This idea reflected his growing belief that stability depended on control, preparation, and realism rather than trust. By the end of his diplomatic career, Machiavelli had seen power at its most exposed. He had watched strong leaders succeed and weak leaders collapse. He had learned that fortune favored those who acted decisively. These experiences would soon be tested. In 1512, the political balance in Florence collapsed once again. Spanish forces entered the city, and with their support, the Medici family returned to power. The Republican government was dissolved, and those who had served it were quickly removed. Niccolò Machiavelli was among them. He was dismissed from his position, banned from public office, and stripped of all political influence. For a man whose life had been built around state service, the fall was sudden and complete. At first, Machiavelli hoped to remain unnoticed. He had not opposed the Medici openly, nor had he taken part in violent resistance. But in early 1513, a conspiracy against the Medici was uncovered, and his name appeared in the investigation. There is no clear evidence that Machiavelli was involved, but suspicion was enough. He was arrested. Machiavelli was imprisoned in Florence and subjected to torture. The method was standard for the time. He was suspended by his arms behind his back and repeatedly dropped, a process designed to extract confessions. He did not confess. After several weeks, a general amnesty was declared and Machiavelli was released. He was physically weakened, politically ruined, and permanently excluded from public life. Following his release, Machiavelli was sent into exile. He retreated to a small rural property outside Florence, far from the political world he once navigated with confidence. For the first time in years, he was no longer an observer inside power. He was watching it from the outside. In letters to friends, Machiavelli described his daily routine in precise terms. During the day, he worked on his land and spoke with local villagers. In the evening, he returned to his study, changed into formal clothes, and read classical authors as if entering a court of great minds. This was not nostalgia. It was preparation. Removed from office, humiliated by torture, and ignored by the rulers he once served, Machiavelli began to reflect on everything he had witnessed. He reviewed the successes and failures of princes, republics, and armies. Most importantly, he reconsidered the relationship between morality and political survival. This period of isolation was not the end of Machiavelli's career. It was the turning point. Because in exile, with nothing left to lose, Machiavelli began to write the work that would define his name forever. After his release and exile, Niccolò Machiavelli faced a reality he had never experienced before. Life without power. He was no longer a diplomat, no longer a public official. The city he had served and studied was under the control of the Medici, and there was no place for him in its politics. Yet this period of forced retirement became the most productive phase of his life. Machiavelli spent his days observing Florence and its surrounding territories from a distance. He talked with peasants, watched local officials, and reread the works of Roman historians he had admired as a young man. Unlike before, he now had the time and perspective to analyze patterns rather than react to events. He began to see political behavior in stark clarity. Leaders, he noted, often acted not according to virtue, but according to circumstance. Morality mattered little when survival was at stake. Promises could be broken, alliances shifted, and loyalty was rarely absolute. During this time, he also reflected on his own failures. He considered why the Medici had returned and why the Republic had fallen. It became clear that political skill, decisiveness, and adaptability mattered far more than ideals or intentions. Observation and careful calculation, he realized, were the true tools of power. Machiavelli did not let bitterness dominate his thinking. Instead, he turned his frustration into a systematic study of politics. What had previously been personal experience became theory. What he had seen in embassies, courts, and wars was now distilled into principles.
By examining the actions of leaders such as Cesare Borgia, the failures of Florence's own republic, and the instability of Italy as a whole, Machiavelli developed a set of ideas that challenged traditional beliefs about morality and governance. These reflections were meticulous, analytical, and practical. He was no longer a participant. He was a scholar of real-world power. In exile, Machiavelli wrote letters, essays, and drafts, slowly preparing for a work that would combine observation, history, and practical advice. Every detail mattered: how a prince should act, how a state could survive, and how leaders could maintain control in a world where fortune and human behavior were unpredictable. This work would eventually become The Prince, the book that would secure Machiavelli's legacy, though not without controversy. Exile, which at first seemed like a punishment, became the laboratory in which Machiavelli's mind refined the mechanics of power. Here, detached from ambition but deeply engaged with reality, he began to see politics for what it truly was, not as it should be, but as it was.
In the quiet of his exile, Niccolò Machiavelli began the work that would define his name for centuries: the Prince. He had no official position, no army, and no immediate influence, yet he had something far more valuable: a clear view of power in action. He drew upon everything he had witnessed: the rise and fall of rulers, the triumphs and mistakes of states, and the behavior of men under pressure. His observations were precise and unsparing. Every alliance, betrayal, and decision became a lesson in survival. Machiavelli examined leaders like Cesare Borgia, who combined cruelty with strategy to consolidate power. He noted Borgia's ability to act decisively in moments of uncertainty, eliminating rivals while maintaining public appearances. Machiavelli did not praise Borgia for morality; he admired effectiveness. At the same time, he reflected on Florence's leaders, many of whom had failed due to indecision, misplaced trust, or reliance on mercenary armies. From these failures, Machiavelli drew practical conclusions. Power required preparation, adaptability, and an understanding of human nature. The Prince was not a guide for virtue or idealism. It was a guide for survival. Machiavelli argued that rulers should prioritize stability and control over personal popularity. Sometimes difficult or harsh actions were necessary to preserve the state. Fear, he noted, could be more reliable than love. His writing was direct, analytical, and often provocative. He combined historical examples with practical advice, creating a manual that was both realistic and controversial. Though Machiavelli wrote the book in exile, his goal was to regain influence. He dedicated it to Lorenzo de' Medici, hoping to demonstrate his understanding of power and to offer his insights to the ruling family. The work was both a study and a subtle appeal, a mixture of scholarship and strategy. By the time he finished, Machiavelli had created a text that challenged traditional thinking. It did not preach morality. It did not promise a perfect society. It reflected the world as he had observed it, unpredictable, harsh, and guided by both human ambition and fortune. The Prince was born out of exile, reflection, and first-hand experience. It captured centuries of political observation in a single, concise work. And with it, Machiavelli transformed from a failed diplomat into a thinker whose ideas would spark debate for generations. When The Prince circulated, it shocked readers across Europe. Its advice was clear, pragmatic, and sometimes brutal. Machiavelli argued that a ruler should prioritize the survival of the state above all else. Morality, personal virtue, and popularity were secondary. This direct approach was unlike anything the world had seen. One of his most famous claims was that it was better for a ruler to be feared than loved if he could not be both. Machiavelli did not mean cruelty for its own sake. He meant that fear could enforce obedience and maintain order in a dangerous, unstable world. Love, he observed, was unreliable. People's loyalty could shift with fortune or personal interest. The book's reception was immediate and polarizing. Critics labeled Machiavelli immoral, manipulative, and even dangerous. They accused him of advocating tyranny and cruelty. Supporters, however, recognized the realism in his work. He did not invent immorality. He described the reality of political behavior. Machiavelli himself responded subtly through his writing. He was aware that his ideas would provoke strong reactions, but he believed that honesty about power was more important than pleasing public opinion. In his view, understanding the world as it actually is, rather than as we wish it to be, was essential for leaders. Machiavelli's advice was practical and rooted in observation. He included examples from ancient Rome and contemporary Italy, showing rulers who succeeded through adaptability and those who failed due to rigidity or misplaced trust. The patterns were clear. Effective leadership demanded decisiveness, strategic calculation, and the courage to act in difficult circumstances. Despite the controversy, the prince solidified Machiavelli's reputation. Some saw him as a teacher of power, others as the embodiment of political cynicism. Over time, the term Machiavellian entered the language, forever linking his name to cunning and ambition. The debate sparked by Machiavelli continues to this day. Was he a callous opportunist or a brutally honest observer of human nature? His writing forced readers to confront uncomfortable truths: that power is complex, morality is conditional, and survival often requires hard choices. Niccolò Machiavelli's name quickly became synonymous with cunning, deceit, and ruthless ambition. Yet much of this reputation was based on misunderstanding. Critics often ignored the context of his writings, focusing only on the most provocative passages. Machiavelli was not advocating evil for its own sake. He was describing how political systems functioned in reality. He observed leaders who succeeded and failed, and he distilled their behavior into lessons for rulers. His goal was practical: how to maintain power and protect the state. At the time, morality and politics were often treated as inseparable. The idea that a ruler might need to act against conventional virtue shocked many readers. Church authorities condemned him, calling his work dangerous and immoral. They feared that if leaders followed his advice, they would abandon ethics entirely. But Machiavelli's real intention was different. He was writing from experience and observation, not ideology. He wanted leaders to understand the harsh realities of human behavior and the unpredictable nature of fortune. For him, acknowledging these truths was necessary for any effective leadership. He also warned against blind idealism. Leaders who relied solely on promises, goodwill, or moral virtue were often overthrown or betrayed. History, he argued, showed that adaptability, pragmatism, and decisiveness were the qualities that ensured survival. Ironically, the very accuracy of his observations contributed to his notoriety. By describing power as it actually existed, Machiavelli challenged long-standing beliefs about virtue and governance. His work exposed uncomfortable truths that many preferred to ignore. Over time, the term Machiavellian became a shorthand for political manipulation. Yet this label obscured his deeper contribution: a clear-eyed, systematic study of leadership, strategy, and the behavior of people under pressure. He was not immoral, he was realistic. More than 500 years after Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince, his ideas continue to shape political thinking. Leaders, strategists, and historians still study his observations about power, human behavior, and the realities of governance. Machiavelli's insistence on pragmatism resonates in modern politics. He understood that decisions are rarely black or white. Leaders must weigh risk against reward, morality against necessity, and long-term stability against short-term popularity. In contemporary politics, we see the same patterns he observed in Renaissance Italy. Negotiations, alliances, and strategic calculation remain central to leadership. political survival often requires compromise, adaptability, and at times, actions that may be unpopular but necessary to protect the state. His lessons are also applied beyond politics. Business leaders, military strategists, and organizational managers have drawn from Machiavelli's insights, learning that effective leadership requires understanding both human motivation and practical constraints. Yet the controversy persists. Critics argue that Machiavelli's approach encourages manipulation and self-interest. Supporters counter that he simply described reality, refusing to sugarcoat the truth. The debate itself illustrates his enduring relevance. He forced people to confront the uncomfortable realities of power. Machiavelli's observations also remind us that leadership is not about personal glory or moral perfection. It is about results, resilience, and the ability to respond effectively to changing circumstances. By studying Machiavelli, we learn that power is complex and survival is never guaranteed. His work challenges leaders and citizens alike to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, a lesson that remains crucial in every era. Niccolò Machiavelli died in 1527, largely forgotten by the political world he had served so faithfully. Yet his writings outlived him, and over the centuries his ideas became central to discussions about leadership, ethics, and power. The myths surrounding Machiavelli, labels of deceit, cruelty, and manipulation, often overshadow the true nature of his work. He was not a promoter of evil. He was a careful observer, a realist, and a student of human behavior. His goal was simple: to understand power and provide guidance for those who wield it. Machiavelli's influence is evident in modern politics, military strategy, and even business. Leaders still study his work to understand negotiation, strategy, and the difficult decisions that come with authority. His lessons remind us that leadership is rarely straightforward and that moral certainty is often insufficient when faced with complex challenges. At the same time, Machiavelli's life is a cautionary tale. He experienced the instability he wrote about: betrayal, exile, and political ruin. His observations came from both his studies and his personal experience, giving his work a depth that abstract theorists rarely achieve. Today, Machiavelli continues to provoke debate. Some see him as cynical, others see him as honest. Some fear his realism, others respect it. But everyone agrees on one point: he changed the way we think about power. By examining his life and his work, we gain insight not only into the politics of Renaissance Italy, but also into the timeless nature of leadership. We learn that power is complex, human behavior is unpredictable, and success often requires courage, calculation, and clarity of vision. Niccolò Machiavelli may have lived over 5 centuries ago, but his questions remain as relevant as ever. How should leaders act when survival is at stake? How do ambition, fear, and opportunity shape human history? And most importantly, what truths are we willing to face about the nature of power? Machiavelli's life and work remind us that understanding the world as it is, rather than as we wish it to be, is the first step toward navigating it successfully.